All right. It's Monday. Welcome to the podcast. My guest this week, my pal, Bryan Bishop, also known as Bald Bryan, on-air personality with the Carolla podcast. Bryan talks about some really cool stuff, like how he got started working with Adam, how he got fired, how he got a brain tumor. You don't really get a brain tumor, but one just shows up, and how he beat the shit out of it, man. He's living a great life. He wrote a book about it, Shrinkage, Manhood, Marriage, and the Tumor That Tried to Kill Me. We're talking about that, and just a really great conversation with a really funny, smart, cool dude. This week and next few weeks, I'm going to be in Los Angeles. I'm working on a pilot out here, so you can check me out in the stand-up scene in the LA area. I'll be at the Improv. I'll be at the Laugh Factory. I'll be at the Pasadena Ice House and other rooms. So check out my website for that, and my new CD can be purchased at my website, Mecurio.com. Check out the CD. I'm really proud of it. It's not me, it's the world. And follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and keep spreading the word about the podcast, people. All right, welcome to the podcast, everybody. This week, I have my friend Bryan Bishop, Bald Bryan, as he's known from the Carolla podcast, and best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author. That's pretty cool, for his book Shrinkage, Manhood, Marriage, and the Tumor That Tried to Kill Me. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me on, Paul. It's been a long time in the works.
Yeah, exactly. We were hanging out in New York, and we talked about having you on, and we try to do it in person. And
it's always better in person when we're talking.
Yeah,
about, right?
Exactly. And we're here at the Carolla Studios, in the studio where you shoot the Carolla show.
Yep.
And so you, I want to get to the book in a minute, but you know, it's interesting. You're a San Francisco guy.
Yeah. From the Bay Area.
Yeah. So the Giants this year.
Oh yeah.
How are we looking?
Well, who cares? Because we won the title last. I was just in Arizona last weekend for spring training.
Oh, you went?
I was just there. It's the best. We being me, my wife and I, we go for spring training. We've actually been every year after they've won the World Series the last 3 times.
Yeah.
Like, 2011, 2013, and then this year 2015.
Yeah. It's
a fun tradition because number one, it's a fun trip.
Yeah.
Phoenix, Scottsdale is a really fun area, but the game experience is so fun because. You go, and the game is very secondary in spring training. It's all about, it's a lovely day. It's 81 degrees. It's, people are on the outfield grass. They don't have seats in the outfield. They have grass, so you lay out your picnic blanket or your beach towel or whatever, and you're drinking, great beer, and you're eating good food, and it's a fun time. Yeah.
Did you?
And my wife used to live out there, and we met out there. So it's kind of a fun little tradition for us to go back. And
Did you go? You didn't go to college out there?
No, we both went to USC in LA. She had been living out there. It's in the book. It's a much longer story than it warrants here, but we met out there in mutual friends' wedding.
No, we like long stories. You can tell this. You want to tell the story short version, long version?
I'll tell the medium version. So I'm out there for a wedding, for a mutual friend's wedding, and it's an out-of-town wedding. So out-of-town weddings, they usually have like a reception for everyone that's from out of town. So we're all in the back of this Mexican restaurant, and we're cleaning dishes. No, we're in the back of the Mexican restaurant, and we're doing the reception. And I'm talking to a friend. I'm talking to a female friend who married my college roommate. Her name is Lindsay. And I'm talking to my friend Lindsay, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? She's like, oh, here, my friend Christy. And Christy and I start talking. And Christy's like, oh, what do you do for a living? And I said, oh, I work for the Carolla show. And she goes, oh, I know someone who works for the Carolla show. And at that point, I said, really? Because there's only like 6 of us, and 4 of them are named Mike. So is it a guy named Mike? And she goes, no. I go, well, is it Adam Carolla? And she goes, no. And I'm like, I don't know who you know. And she goes, Lindsay, who do I know at the Carolla show? And Lindsay goes, Bryan. Bryan's the guy you know. We had met a year prior in Scottsdale, coincidentally, when I was out there with my then girlfriend. She had just broken up with her boyfriend, and we were out there for the USC Arizona State game. She had 2 tickets. Her freshly broken up boyfriend was going to go, but decided not to for obvious reasons. Right. And so she's like, I'm not going to go alone. Like, I'm still going to go to the game. So she hooked up with her friend Lindsay, who said, oh, my friend Bryan's going out there with his girlfriend. Meet up with them, and you guys can all go together.
Oh, wow.
And so we met, spent the weekend together, and completely forgot about each other.
Did you? I was going to say,
no,
I thought it was going to be like, I was really hammered. I met her at a bar, and I don't remember anything.
Not at all. We completely forgot until we met at this wedding, which I previously had mentioned. and we kind of wanted to give each other shit, but we both had forgotten, so we're both equally culpable. And
well, how do you spend the weekend with somebody and not even remember their face a little bit? Like,
well, the way my defense and Christy's interpretation is, I'm that good of a boyfriend that because I was in a relationship, so I was
man,
with my
you should be a
girlfriends.
politician.
I was
Listen
with
to this
I
answer.
really was. I'm also slightly aloof with strangers, but I really was. I'm in a relationship, and it was just, this was a friend's friend who was recently dumped, who didn't know. Frankly, I thought she was like this lonely person, didn't know anybody. So I was like, we're being nice and just let her tag along. And lo and behold, a year later, we re-met and started dating and hit it off. I mean, it was. I don't necessarily believe in love at first sight, because I kind of think love involves a little more than just thinking someone's like ravishing or whatever. But Christy and I hit it off right away, and it was pretty obvious.
You can't have love at first sight. You can't remember anybody a minute
exactly
after you
right.
see them.
I love everyone I meet because I forget them, and then if we ever meet later, it's clearly
your whole
destined,
life is Groundhog Day.
It's clearly destined to be.
Are you aloof because you're inherently shy, or because you don't like people? I'm getting less and less that I like people. Honestly, like, I find people to be exhausting on a lot of levels. But like, is it more an internal thing or just a reaction to the world around you?
I don't think I'm shy. I don't think I don't think I dislike people. I joke that I am so devoted to my girlfriend that I forgot everyone else I met. But the truth is, whether I'm hanging out with you, if you and I were hanging out at a restaurant, and then later on that evening, for lunch, and later on that evening, you're like, man, the server we had really was good looking, I would be like, I didn't notice, because I was focused on our conversation. I don't have. Carolla talks about his hypervigilance, like his diffused awareness. He notices everything around him. When I'm like in a conversation or doing a podcast or whatever, or in a relationship, I guess, I don't really have that, noticing other people. Christy will often be like, man, that guy was really, blah, blah, weird or whatever. I'm like, was he? I don't know. We were talking. I have no idea what was going on around us.
Growing up, were you sort of an outgoing kind of kid, or were you sort of more internal?
No, I was pretty outgoing.
Yeah.
I was very, very verbal, very talky, and didn't have a ton of friends, but was very outgoing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, I guess maybe you were selective with friends.
No, they were selective with me.
Why?
I don't know. I didn't really have many friends growing up.
Were you like the nerd in school?
I was very nerdy. Very strange.
Well, you won.
I had a weird sense of humor.
You won like $100,000 on Millionaire.
Right.
You're like you're like sort of geeky nerd, sort of a lot of knowledge.
I loved trivia. When I was a little kid, I loved a few things. I loved trivia. I loved reading. I loved the WWF, which is now the WWE. I loved baseball cards and maybe Saturday Night Live. Like, I had weird interests for like a little kid.
Tell me about this, because you're not the only sort of nerdy, smart guy, and I don't mean that in a demeaning way.
No,
who likes wrestling. Like I've had some wrestlers on my show, Mick Foley and Cool Steve Austin, and they talked about a lot of their fans are those guys, and the two don't go together, because there could be nothing more fake and pure entertainment than wrestling, and there's nothing intellectually stimulating about it. Excuse me. So why do you think that people like
there's nothing intellectually stimulating about it for an adult. You're looking at it from your point of view. Keep in mind, I loved wrestling when I was 9 and 10 and 11, and I think a 9-year-old, wrestling is grand theater. It's Shakespeare. Now as an adult, we can look at it and say that's melodrama. That's broad drama. That's, this guy's brother turned on him and now they're enemies. That's ridiculous.
Well, you could say that about a lot of action movies too, right?
But as a kid, that's amazing. And plus you get to see these huge behemoths fighting each other. So you have these ridiculous Shakespearean melodramatic storylines. To a 9-year-old, it's the first time ever hearing about, the referee turning evil and throwing the match. I'm like, how could he do that? He's a referee. He's supposed to be, but that's mind blowing to a 10-year-old. So maybe that's why, I will say that a lot of the people I know today as adults who have fondness for wrestling from their childhood are smart, geeky people. They're people who maybe were a little bit advanced as a kid because I don't know, I'm theorizing here, maybe way too much, but like I said, the storylines that seem so ridiculous to us as adults were enthralling to me as a kid.
Yeah.
This guy's a barber, but he's also a gladiator.
His name is George the Animal Steel.
He eats the turnbuckle. Oh my God, he must live in an insane asylum during the day.
Mick Foley was on, and we talked about like, what you have to do as a wrestler. You get the storyline and you got to play it out. Mm-hmm. And one of them called for him to do a 25-foot fall onto a table, a breakaway table.
Thank God it was a breakaway table.
Yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise that would hurt.
With a pad like the size of the pad you have in a gym to like do yoga.
Sure.
And he goes, it ruined my back. And I said, well, you're at the top of this, whatever you were, and you know you have to do it. And you just go, I know this is going to hurt. Here I go. Like he said, this because you have to do it.
You have to acknowledge the fact that it's going to
thousands of people. And do you go to live events?
Oh no, I went to one live wrestling event as a little kid. I mean, my wrestling, ironically, with you talking about Steve Austin and Mick Foley, my enthusiasm sort of died out when that era came in. I think they called it the Attitude Era, and it was just kind of, it went from wholesome family entertainment to sort of more of a rocked up, energy drink before energy drinks were a thing kind of era, and it wasn't for me. It was my natural breaking off point when I was, 14 years old or something. Plus I was, high school, and I was into girls, or I was into sports or whatever.
So you went to USC with the idea of, were you a film major?
No, I was a print journal. That was the other thing I was into as a kid. I was forgetting something. I was a huge journalism nerd. I was like, really? I wrote articles for my local paper when I was in sixth grade. When I was like in middle school, I would write articles.
Not the school paper.
No, my local paper.
Really?
Paper.
What would you
write?
It
was a city of 20,000 people, but I wrote I wrote write-ups of the middle school volleyball and basketball games, and I filed them to the paper every night after the game, because I loved journalism. I loved sports writing. I mean, it was probably number one passion in my teen years. Sadly. Very sadly.
Bob Costas, the same thing. He said he was a kid in St. Louis, and he'd be like listening to St. Louis Cardinal games on the radio.
Listened to so many games on the radio. A's games back then, because the A's were my team in Little League. That's the first team I played for. And when you're wearing the uniform, I could have played for the Blue Jays, and I would have been a Blue Jays fan or a White Sox. It happened the A's were across the bay, and all my friends and family were Giants fans. I'm like, no way, man, the A's. And plus they were good at that time. So it was very easy to be an A's fan. So I was obsessed with the A's and writing about baseball and sports and all sorts of stuff.
Did you think about like that might be your career?
That's what I wanted. I wanted to be the next great sports writer. I fantasized, or not even fetishized, but I built up this image of what it is to be a sports writer. You know what I mean? I'll be the guy at the desk with the derby and pounding on the typewriter. Well, this is 1988. You know what I mean?
On a cigar.
Yeah, exactly.
With the word press in your fedora.
Dude. There was actually that was the picture. I dressed up like that for the picture in my byline for the local paper.
That's hilarious.
I actually wore the derby with a thing that said press, and I chomped on a fake cigar.
Oh my God! So when you're
imagine that kid trying to get friends, 11 years old. Hey, want to hang out? Want to hang out and read the New York Times?
Did this come from your parents, your siblings? Like, what was the?
My dad is a big sports fan.
Yeah.
So that probably helped a lot, but I don't know what it was.
But you read mainly the sports page, not the news or the business.
No, it was all sports.
And when you're writing as a sports journalist, I always wonder sort of, okay, so you've got to convey the facts of the game and what happened, but how do you define yourself in terms of embellishment, in terms of creating a picture? That's where the art of it comes in, right?
I was 11.
No, but I mean, sure, you've read enough to know, like, in your mind,
right.
and like, sort of as a journalist, I've always wondered, sort of, how does a sports journalist, sort of take the facts of the game and sort of spin that into something that's any different than any other sports journalist, right? Like how does a person define themselves as a sport? Like Peter Vesey, who covered the Knicks for years, or Frank DeFord.
I know who all these guys are, sadly.
Right.
That's a great question. I mean, I think the thing that attracted me to journalism and sports journalism specifically is, number one, you could tell a story by covering a team through the season. You know what I mean? The ups and downs, and this team's on a roll, or this team's on a slump, or whatever. That was interesting. The sort of narrative idea. Back to wrestling, the narrative of it, the storyline. This isn't just a game. This is one small game in a large season. You know what I mean? I used to write. My brother was a good athlete, and I was not. My brother played for a club team for soccer when he was a little kid. I covered the soccer team for the local, because it was the local, the local area team. So I covered the team for the local paper, and I loved the narrative of this is their season, here's how it's going, they're on a roll, they're not on a roll, whatever it is, this guy's having a great year, or this kid, 9-year-old.
This 9-year-old.
Yeah. And
He's juicing.
And here I am 12, the know-it-all. But I also, and speaking of know-it-all, the thing I loved was being able to use new words that I learned. Like I was a big vocab nerd, so I was like, a plethora of goals, or the other team, looked inept on defense, things like that. I just loved using these new words I learned. Again, I'm reinforcing the image that I did not make a lot of friends when I was younger.
Yeah, but you'd be a cool kid to hang out with. Like I would have hung out.
I was a cool kid for adults to hang out with. I was not a cool kid for other kids to hang out with.
Were you annoying, pretentious in that way? I don't seem like you would. Yeah.
I probably was.
Yeah.
If I'm to be fair and harsh, I probably was.
Now, did you think, okay, I'm gonna be a sports journalist, and then did you meet journalists, and it's sort of sometimes you meet people in the field that you want to do, and they're not what you expected or hoped, and it sort of becomes like, oh boy, that just burst that bubble for me, right? Like,
you know what? The only time that I came close to having that, thankfully, was when I was there was no high school in my city, so I was going to go to a different high school in a different city, or I could go to the private high school a couple of cities away. And when I was considering what school to go to, I was thinking about, maybe I should go to this school, high school that is. I was looking up like their famous alumni or whatever. Again, huge nerd, and I saw that Bill Keller, editor-in-chief of the New York Times, was an alumnus of the high school. I was like, I meant to go to this high school because the great Bill Keller went there. And I wrote him a letter. I typed him a letter and mailed it to him. And I was like, hi, Mr. Keller. I'm an aspiring journalist, and I'm going to go to the same high school you went to. And he never wrote back. I'm still very upset about it. So, Bill Keller, I'm sure you're a regular listener to this podcast. Want you to know that I'm very disappointed in you. But that was the closest.
And you wrote him a plethora of letters.
I wrote him a plethora of needlessly elaborate words, and I never heard back from Mr. Keller. But that was the closest I ever came to have my dreams crushed by a journalist.
And so were you like on that path to do journalism? You went to you were a journalism major at USC,
I was the
right?
editor-in-chief of my high school paper. I was the newspaper kid at the school. Everyone knew that was my thing, and I loved it. And then I was a print journalism major at USC. And you know what? Actually, to answer your question, the real crushing blow for journalism, it helped that I was sort of burnt out already. But it was when my professor freshman year, my first journalism professor, he was the worst. He was the worst, and not because, for a lot of reasons, but mainly because I maybe this was naive and juvenile of me at the time, but I had a very strong opinion and thoughts on what's fair and not fair, and what's right and not right. And what was unfair to me was what he did, which was establish a set of rules for his class, but then grade on a totally different set of rules. So the standard was, and this is my first journalism class, and this is really the death blow for me for journalism, was when he explained that you will have two tests. One will be a midterm, one's a final, and they will be on the history of news in modern America, and you will be graded solely on facts. For every fact you include in your answer, they're essay answers. For every fact in your answer, you'll get a point, and we're going to grade on the curve. The whole class is graded on the curve. And so you can write, about FDR and the New Deal, and you will not get graded on the cohesiveness of your essay. Oh no, sorry, I jumped ahead. You were going to get graded on the cohesiveness of your essay, on your argument style, and how written your response was. And I wrote what I thought was a great test response in my midterms, and when I got the paper back, it was simply a bunch of check marks by every fact. We were getting a point for every fact, and that's how the class was graded. There was no.
Well, it's funny because that gets to what I was saying a few minutes ago about, as a sports journalist, how do you separate yourself from a guy who's just sort of giving a litany of facts of the game and become and in a good way an embellisher and a storyteller that's evocative and all of that. And you're saying this guy was basically he was a fact Nazi.
It was.
And that
maybe it's a weeding out process. Maybe it was an elaborate weeding out process.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I got weeded out because it wasn't for me. It really turned my stomach in terms of in terms of what I thought was fair and not fair, right and not right, right and wrong. And so it was that was really, I remember when I got the midterm back, I was like, this is not for me. This is not what I want to do.
So did you sort of at that point, were you still enamored with journalism, but just not him, or you're just saying
I was done with journalism at that point. I'd done it for so long. I'd really been writing for newspapers, and this is 1997. So the internet isn't quite what it is today.
I was going to say, you picked a good time to get into journalism.
Exactly. Well, those my two favorite things at that point were journalism and radio. Those are the two growth industries in 1997.
You should go into coal mining.
Right, exactly. What I'm saying is, in 1997, there wasn't the option to go write for Deadspin or Bleacher Report. You know what I mean? These things didn't exist.
Yeah, it was just starting to come about.
They were in infancy. ESPN was barely even a website at that point. So I loved writing, though. I mean, I writing, whether I was good at it or not, came so easy to me. I just loved doing it, and I love movies, and I love the creative aspect of it. And luckily, very very luckily, I fell into the perfect major for me at the time, which was creative writing, English creative writing.
Yeah.
And it satisfied the need in me to write. But also to sort of explore a more creative side of it, obviously, rather than the facts, quote unquote, of journalism.
So, how did radio come about? I mean, I know, but for the listeners who may not, I know in terms of your relationship with Adam, and this show came about initially that you were a screener, right?
Yeah, at K-Rock.
And but was this sort of for a lot of us in life, sort of a career path that you kind of fell into unexpectedly?
Right. Yeah, I would say it was. So here's what happened. So I finished college in 2000, and that was right in the middle of right at the beginning of a really bad, the .com bubble was bursting at that point. A lot of were going under.
Right.
My first job was for a startup, and it went under within 6 months. So I'm living in LA, no job, and I need part-time employment at very least just to pay my rent.
What were you doing for the startup?
Writer. I was a writer for it was trying to be, what can I compare it to? It was a really, 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 really poorly conceived website. It was called, the name itself should have set you running. It was called Buzz Zone. 3 Z's in a row. BUZZZONE. Buzz Zone. And the
That's
mascot,
the marketing meeting, okay, we need a name, Buzz Zone. Now we need something catchy. Let's put a third Z in.
Buzz Zone. And Buzz Zone. It was actually a delicious Italian dish. It was the Buzz Zone. And so the mascot was a bee, and it was aimed at college students, and it was going to be their pop culture website. And luckily, they paid me to write a whole bunch of articles that never saw the light of day. But I got to write for 6 months and get paid for it. But then after that, they went under. I went under, and I needed a job, and so I was looking for part-time employment, and I saw a listing for call screener needed, and I thought, I knew K-Rock because, number one, they're the biggest station, not only in LA, but certainly one of the biggest in the world, but K-Rock was the home to Loveline, and I was a huge Loveline fan because they were syndicated up north when I was listening up there. Then they just started being syndicated up there, and they had Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew on Loveline late at night. And so I was like, oh, K-Rock, that's awesome. I'll go try and be a call screener over there. And the interview was actually for a call screener job for Loveline. They filled it with somebody else, but because they needed somebody and they liked me at the interview, they gave me the job screening calls during the day. So I did that for a year, at which point they bumped me up to do it on Loveline. So that was about a year after I initially interviewed. I got the job.
That must have been cool, working on a show that you've been listening to.
It was awesome,
right?
It was great. It was great. It was decent pay. It was good hour. It was 10 to midnight, so it was it was convenient. And it was I got to meet rock stars and actors and celebrities and comedians and people I really liked. And it was hosted by two celebrities who I really admired, Adam and Drew, who I grew up listening to.
Yeah.
So it was a win-win-win-win.
Did you? But for you, in your mind, and this was sort of not a permanent, I don't want to say temporary, but this was sort of a way station.
It would do for now.
Right.
Yeah, it was a lily pad.
Right. From what I had read and sort of about you, this was not oh yeah, this is what I'm just here now, do this until I get back on track to do the other thing, which is the writing, right?
Yeah, what was I trying to do at that point? I think I was trying to write. I think I was trying to maybe get back involved, like with another.com, because that was, that was the hot new thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was hard. It was hard for a couple of years to even just to find work. So I was happy to have just the part-time employment. And plus I was also doing a couple other things here and there. In LA, I don't know how it is in New York, but in LA, it's kind of easy to make part-time money. Like you can find part-time work. It's easy to be underemployed, so it wasn't difficult to round out my days with employment.
Didn't you lose the job at some point because of something? Did you do something wrong, or did you?
I was actually I'm trying to figure out the year. I think it was 2003 or 4. 2004, let's say. I got a full-time job with Channel 1 News. And Channel 1 News is the in-school news network, like CNN for teens. It's where Maria Menounos started there, Anderson Cooper started there, Serena Alchul, like a bunch of Lisa Ling started there, a bunch of really well-known journalists started there, sort of like a AAA for journalism. I was a writer there for their website, and so I had a full-time job, but I was still doing K-Rock Loveline at night, and so I'm doing this full-time 8-hour, 40 hours a week, plus picking up shifts at 5 days a week at Loveline, and it's got to be too much, and I was kind of mentally checking out. And one of the things that kept it interesting for me was I wrote a blog for a fan site, like here from the call screener's perspective. Here's what goes on.
Right.
This is an interesting little look behind the scenes at how the show gets produced.
Right.
And people enjoyed it, or at least the small number of fans who read it enjoyed it. And I think at one point, I forget exactly the machinations of how it went down, but it was like, Drew and or Adam, were frustrated at a phone call that got through, and they're like, why do we do this? Why, it's not our job to talk to these people, or whatever it was, whatever they said. Why do we talk to these people, or why do we waste our time? And my blog entry that night was, you do that because it's your job. You guys are millionaires. You guys are paid so much money to talk to idiots.
Jesus.
Like it's your, but. It was kind of funny, but it was also kind of true. But maybe the call screener shouldn't have been saying that.
Right.
So they came to me soon after that. They were like, "Wow, we're gonna let you go. It's been you've been here a long time." And it's like, yeah, I agree. I've been here a little too long.
You weren't too upset about it?
Oh, no. I mean, no, I didn't need the money. I mean, I had a full-time job, and I just enjoyed being around the show and saying that I worked for Loveline. It was more for just the cool badge. We're for K-Rock. Get to go to concerts if I want to.
Do you ever think of writing about music and covering music from that perspective?
I have turned my back on new music just because, not for a quality reason. I just realized that I cannot keep up with everything that comes out.
Yeah.
And I sound like a fool trying to talk about bands I don't know about.
It's a full-time thing.
It is. It really is. And I even am letting. I mean, I've also willingly, turned my back on television, even though I know there's great TV coming out, and I've never seen an episode of Breaking Bad. I've never seen an episode of Mad Men. I've never seen.
Really? Why?
I know they're good. I'm devoting my life to movies. I'm trying to see every movie. So I want to. If I had to make a conscious choice.
Well, you have a podcast where you talk about, tell people what that is.
I do the Film Vault, which is once a week, which is a movie podcast. But in order to. I do not consider myself a movie expert. I consider myself a guy who loves movies and knows a lot about them, and hopefully sees a lot of them and has interesting and or insightful takes on movies, some movies. But in order to have any kind of legitimacy to be able to talk about movies with any kind of authority, I need to see as many as I can. And if I'm trying to see 3 or more a week, there's only so much TV that you can watch, and I don't want to pick and choose, or I don't want to watch a few episodes of The Wire. I'd rather watch the whole thing, and that's going to take too much time away from movies, so I'm going to willingly ignore it. Again, I know these are great, and someday maybe I'll binge watch a whole bunch, but for now I have to choose a path.
Do you find in what you do now on Adam's show, how do you get your writing fix now in your life? Because from the way you've described it and what I've read about you, in terms of your passion for writing, like you don't ever, that doesn't go away. That's like in your DNA, right? And so, the role on the show, sidekick, co-host, however you label it, you jump in and you do sound effects, you running commentary with Adam, and I've been on the show and you're great at it. So there's writing on the fly, but in terms of actual writing, this doesn't seem like the kind of job that's fulfilling that.
It's kind of the antithesis of writing. It's funny in a way. I don't know how much writing you do or have done. I imagine quite a bit. You know that you, for me, for my process, I spend so much time thinking about the writing before, and it's like the words on the paper are almost the coda to this whole thing, the denouement of this whole thing. It's like I've thought about where it's going to go, what I'm going to say so much that writing the words is almost rote. R-O-T-E, not W-R-O-T. But this podcast, I'm pointing to the microphones. Podcasting is, I'll give you a real world example. I live 45 minutes in the other direction, so I call Christy on the way home every night.
Your wife?
Yeah, my wife, Christy, and I say, hey, how's the one who I met in Scottsdale? I say, hey,
who didn't remember?
Who doesn't?
He barely remembers it when she goes in the house. He goes, why are you in my house?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm your wife. Oh, right. Okay.
Usually when I call, it goes straight to voicemail, and I'll be like, what happens? I'm screening my calls.
You are? And you are who?
And she'll say, how was the show? And I say, it was a good show. It was funny, or it was a great show. It was really funny. And she'll say, oh, great. Did you say anything funny, or were you funny? Did you make any good jokes? And my legitimate answer every time is, I have no idea. I have no idea, because your brain, my brain, when I'm doing this, is in the moment. It's erase all memories. It's like you are keeping up with Adam. You're keeping up with whoever's in the guest chair. You're constantly. You're trying to anticipate what's coming next, which is the opposite in your brain of making memories. Making memories is not anticipating what's coming next. It's not being in the moment. It's reflecting. It's
But are you calling writing making memories? Is that what you're saying?
I call it accessing memories. Yeah. I mean, to an extent, even if it's creative writing, you're still drawing on thoughts, or I'm formulating ideas or notions, or like, where should the story go, or what should this character say next, or it's the opposite of improvising to me.
And did you find that you had to settle into that role as an improviser? Because as a writer, you, like you said, you sit, you plod, you think about what you're going to write, maybe you outline. It is the antithesis of someone who just plop, boom, let's go, and just open your mouth and just trust your gut. So what was that process like for you to kind of become comfortable with that? Because you're really good at it now.
Thanks. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. I haven't thought about that until just now, this moment.
That's why I'm here, Bryan.
I try to think about things.
I try to get people to think about things.
Is sports journalism, especially the thing that I devoted my life to for so many years, is the ultimate reflect and think about before you write. You know what I mean? Because the game's already happened. You've already digested the game. You have thoughts during the game about how it's going, like, oh, this guy's heating up, or this guy doesn't look right, or if the coach is like, without thinking about it, you've already constructed the narrative. Think about just as a sports fan after the game, you're like, oh, that sucked. We just couldn't get anything going. Or it's like, oh, everything seemed to go our way. You know, you've already constructed the narrative by the time the final whistle or the final out or whatever has been made.
Right.
So that's the ultimate. I've already done a fair amount of reflecting, and now I will tell the story. Now I will recount my thoughts and opinions and insights or whatever, in the form of journalism. You know what I mean? Because really, that's the beauty of, I don't know why we're getting back to this. That's the beauty of sports writing, is that you're really an op-ed guy. Even if you're writing the story of how a game went, you're telling the story. It's like this player couldn't get his shot to fall today, or whatever it is.
But this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation about sports writing and why it exists, right? Because you can make the argument. If I'm a sports writer today, right? Mm-hmm. Within minutes of a game being over, it's on ESPN.
Yeah,
it's on every ESPN.
In-game highlights.
So there has to be a reason for being, right? So when you're writing this piece as Bryan Bishop, it's like the only reason for you to write this piece is not to inform people that the Lakers won 81-84.
Yeah, because they can get that from a box score. That's that back to your list of facts. Then.
Right. So, it's to give them a picture of that game and an experience of that game that only Bryan Bishop, and then the Bryan Bishops of the world sort of become the Frank DeFords of the world and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. So in that sense, that makes sense to me that you have to sit and plot and think and sit and plot, right? Mm-hmm. Before you write. Mm-hmm. Here, in your role on the show, and I don't know on your podcast as well possibly, it's a matter of just run and gun.
Much
right?
more so here. Yeah,
Right.
much more so here.
And when did you feel like you had it? You got it?
Oh, I don't feel like I have it at all.
But that's why you're good at it, because you don't lay back. Like, right, people, right? You can always be better, right?
I guess. I hope. Thank you very much for saying that.
Well, no, because
true.
Adam's very quick. I mean, and I've been
He's
on
the
the show,
quickest.
and I'm a
I'll
big
tell
fan of the show.
anyone. I'll tell anyone who listen that the years, at least the years I did the radio show, and even to this day, it's going to comedy college, specifically going to improv college. It's like I feel like I am as educated in improv as any groundling. Well, that is different. It's different. But what I'm saying is being next to Adam and keeping up with him comedically and just conversationally, and he'll go from funny to opinionated to insightful to angry to all these things within a minute.
Yeah, you have to really listen.
And you have to shift gears and not let the audience know that you're shifting gears. He slides in and out, and it's people who listen on a regular basis and there are fans. I don't think they quite understand what a remarkable gift he has for improvisation and
well, because he makes it look easy.
He does. He really does. And it's I'm thankful to have someone like him who is so much better at it than me to keep me on my toes, to keep me striving to get a little bit better.
But if you weren't good at it, you wouldn't be around either.
It's like,
and it's very fast with him. Like, you really got to, but you also have to know when to get out of the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Ed McMahon knew when to get out of the way of Johnny Carson.
I'm constantly struggling with that, to let him do his thing versus when to jump in.
Right, because then if you don't do enough, it's like, well, why are you here? And if you do too much, it's like you're getting in the goddamn way. Shut up.
That's a fine line. It's you know what I like to. I just thought of myself as I'm the horse and he's the guy with the carrot dangling in front of me. He's the carrot. It's like I will never get to that level, but I'm constantly sprinting to that level. You know what I mean? Like, that's always the goal. The goal is always 1 foot farther than I can get to.
Get to that level. You never know, because look, I mean, he was at your. No one's born into that. Like,
right.
If you look. You look at anybody early on, you look at any performer, whether it's Johnny Carson, Conan, Jon Stewart, Adam Carolla, they're green and rusty looking. Like, they don't have you look at early Seinfeld episodes. Sure. Those are very awkward.
They
very
haven't found their voice. I was watching old Simpsons episodes, and the show that we consider the greatest, animated show of all time, best show of all time, is, it had trouble finding its feet the first year and a half.
Yeah. And so, was there a big adjustment for the team going from radio to podcast, or it's pretty much a radio show still in that sense? I mean, it's a little looser because you can swear or whatever, but like, how dynamically did it change for you in terms of being a performer on the show and being involved in the production of it?
There were so many dynamic. The biggest dynamic difference was I was sick. You know what I mean? I was just recovering from cancer treatment.
This fake tumor that you wrote about?
This fake tumor that I wrote about that's now earned me, millions of dollars via this bestseller.
Yes.
These aren't on, by the way. Right?
No. Good, I like the whole ball thing that you did, too.
Listen, there's a thing in our business called committing.
So you
No, but I was really sick, man, when we first started.
Yeah,
so.
when you found out about it, if I read this correctly, like, wasn't your wife almost out of a job? And you were both out of a job?
We were both unemployed.
Like, it was a Tuesday and you found out of a job, and on a Friday you found out about it?
The day she got laid off was the day I told her that there's something wrong. We need to see a doctor.
Because you were dizzy.
I was having specifically. Issues? I was having like little numbness around my lips, my tongue, my scalp, loss of balance at the gym. You know what I mean? Things like that, and weird neurological stuff that I couldn't explain. And so I said to her, we gotta figure something out. Scary stuff, obviously, and we're both unemployed at that point. So, but we'll get to that in a second. To get back to your question, to answer your question, Adam started podcasting right away after the radio show went away, alone. He did it basically out of his house, just talking to people. And it wasn't until...
Was he taking calls?
No,
or just interviewing people? He probably
early on, it was just him and a microphone and another person. I think he started folding in calls at some point. He moved over here to the Orange Couch studio, which this was his warehouse. He built all of this many years later. But early on, it was just him, the Orange Couch, and a couple of microphones. And it wasn't until he had a couple of pilots in the works, one at CBS and one at NBC. They both didn't go. They both failed. And it wasn't until then that I got the call from him, and I was just starting to recover myself. And this was early 2010, I think. Maybe late 2000. I know it was early 2010, I think it was, when I got the call from him saying, hey, I'm done with these pilots. I don't care if I'm putting it behind me. I believe in the podcast. I want to put the band back together. Would you come back and be a part of the show, just like the old radio days? And
now, how long had you guys been apart at that point?
The radio show, about a year, because the radio show had gone off in February 2009. I got diagnosed April 2009, and I spent basically the next 6 to 8 months, really like battling, for my health. And once I started to recover fortuitously, it was at the same time Adam was sort of committing himself to this podcast. Like, I really believe in the podcast. I think it's going somewhere. I want to do it like the radio show. He was on the
forefront of that.
He really was. He really was. Especially of doing. I mean, there were clearly people who were doing podcasts before, but Adam wanted to do it like the old radio show, which was kind of visionary. The people were doing it mostly, out of their their homes or out of their cars, or it was more of a fly by night operation for the most part, for industry wide. And Adam was like, no, we're gonna make a show out of this. We're gonna have guests. We're gonna have a producer. We're gonna have news, and we're gonna it's gonna be the show. And I said, sounds great. And that's when we started podcasting. I think it was early 2010. Like as the show it now is when it became to take shape.
And were you was the plan, the blueprint, the 30,000-foot vision, basically the radio show as a podcast with you guys picking up your roles on radio?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we built it out little by little. I mean, it was a while before I even got my sound effects machine. It was a while before we put a door on the studio. You know what I mean? Like the things got built out piece by piece, but then I forget what it was, but at some point Adam was like, this where we're sitting, literally where we're sitting right now in the studio, this was like open warehouse space. Adam has tools back here and his cars and stuff. Yeah. And he said, I'm clearing all that out.
He's a big car guy for people who don't know.
And he had cars that were in various stages of, renovation and repair. He said, I'm clearing all this out. We're turning this into a studio. Green room, multiple studios, offices, control room, all that. You've seen this place?
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So he framed it all out.
I've done his here, and I've done Dr. Drew's.
Okay, here. So you've seen the whole operation when it's up and running.
Yeah.
And it's impressive. And he had the vision, and he's like, this is going to be like a for reals business. And I'm glad he did.
So after you get laid off, 2009, it's literally right on top of that you get diagnosed.
Yeah,
right?
a couple months later.
Yeah, and you get a prognosis of 6 months.
Right.
So how do you go through that therapy and not just say, well, I got 6 months, it's not worth it, fuck it. Like, how do you keep a stiff upper lip, and how do you go forward?
Well, a couple things. Number one, I went to a different doctor. I got a second opinion, and the doctor offered me a little bit of hope. He was like, I explained to him we got the 6 months to a year diagnosis, and he was like, I would take that with a big grain of salt. He's like, this is potentially treatable. Like, I can't guarantee you that we're gonna knock this out of the park, but this all is not lost.
So why was this first doctor so pessimistic?
He sucked. Yeah, he sucked. The doctor sucked.
You should not go to a drive-through cancer treatment center. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
No kidding.
Dunkin' Donuts.
Hindsight, Paul, is 2020.
An In-N-Out Burger / cancer treatment center.
P.S. Give me the double. And the initial doc. Here's how horrible he was. He gave me 6 months to a year, and then it was a full week before I heard from him again. It's like, if I have 6 months on this earth and you're waiting a week to call me to start treatment, you've taken up a certain percentage of my life. So it's like I'm glad time is so cheap to you, but you're telling me it's quite expensive. So I ended up with a different doctor, and also Adam, Carolla is a good guy and a good friend, in addition to being a good boss and a good podcaster. And I called him to tell him the news, and the story's in my book. But his first call was to Dr. Drew, and then to Dr. Bruce, is another doctor that he knows, who's a doctor who comes on our podcast once in a while. And Dr. Bruce is an ER doctor, so he actually knows a lot about a lot.
Right.
He knows a little about a lot. And so Dr. Bruce, actually, his sister had the exact same thing, the same brain tumor in the same part of her brain, the brainstem. And he's like, I'm happy to talk to Bryan and have him call me. So I called Bruce, and this is right after the diagnosis, so we're pretty shaken up. And he's like, this all sounds, I'm telling him what's happening. He's like, this is all bringing back memories from my sister. This is the same thing. Brainstem glioma is the name of the tumor. And he's like, yeah, she had that too. And I'm like, what happened to her? How long did she last, basically? Yeah. Like, what happened to her? And he's like, oh, she's good. She's living in Pasadena. She was 10 years later. And I'm like,
wow.
It was that little glimmer of hope. You know what I mean?
That must have
like,
been the longest 3 seconds of your life after you asked the question and he answered.
And I didn't even know what I wanted to ask because I didn't want to ask him a potentially painful question. Like, when did your sister die?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, no, she's living in Pasadena. It's been 10 years. And it's like, oh, so it's not a death sentence. Like, people we know, friends, people we know live with this thing. So, it was the little glimmers of hope. And I had this comparison made for me and I used it in my book.
Yeah. And the book is called Shrinkage, Manhood, Marriage, and the Tumor That Tried to Kill Me, a bestseller, New York Times. You can get it on Amazon.
Anywhere books
and it's coming out in paperback in a few months if you're too cheap to buy a hardcover.
Yeah, you can buy it on paperback in June. But I mentioned this in the book. It was told to me, and I thought it was so great. And this has really helped people, or so they've told me. Some people have told me that it's like when you get this devastating news, this diagnosis. It's like you're at the bottom of a well, and you don't know how to get out. And these little bits of hope, these little bits of information that help, these little friends that have survival stories, doctors that have good news, good scans, good tests, good blood test results. All these little things are like little pebbles, like little rocks you can grab onto to get yourself out of the well. And you search for these pebbles, and sometimes you find them, and sometimes you have to search for them. But every little bit of information, every little bit of hope is like that little pebble you can get a foothold on or grab hold to and get yourself out of that deep, dark well.
You're into this a few months, and the chemo and the radiation is brutal. And you had said something that I read, that you could sit in the waiting room when you were waiting to go into radiation, and you could tell in terms of the other patients who was doing okay and who was having a bad day. And from your perspective, how could you tell?
It was the radiation room, the waiting room for the radiation area is very intense.
In what sense? Just
in the sense that you know why you're there, and everyone else knows why everyone else is there. I mean, in terms of life and death.
Right.
I mean, no one. The waiting area this is my perspective. The waiting area for like the cancer infusion center that I still go to, there's people of varying degrees of sickness. Like some people are there, like me, they're in maintenance mode and they're just there to get their their infusion every 3 months and they're off living their life. And I'm very fortunate.
Is that where you are now? It's called maintenance mode.
Yeah, that's where I am now. And I'm very, very, very fortunate.
Are you beyond the 5 year?
I am. It'll be 6 years. It'll be 6. Yeah, 6 years in April.
Now I know 5 years is sort of the magic number for breast cancer, but is it for your type of cancer also?
It's considered a big number for any type of cancer.
Yeah, and there's nothing there, nothing.
No, there. Well, to jump ahead in the story, people ask me all the time. Exactly what you asked me. They ask me all the time. They're like, "Oh, so there's nothing there? You're good, or you're in remission, or whatever. You're all clear now." And it's like, no, I still have a brain tumor. I'll probably always have a brain tumor. They can't get rid of it completely. That's why it's an offer.
I can get it out. I have a pen.
Okay. Well, then
we'll do it on the podcast. This will be a groundbreaking podcast.
This would actually make the iTunes
I could go through the year.
This would make the top of the iTunes. This would be featured hot on iTunes.
So you're in that room and everybody knows why they're there.
Yeah,
so
it's just intense, man. Yeah. And some people are afraid. I didn't so much. I could tell less who's having a good day and who's having a bad day. I could tell more what stage they were in their treatment. You know what I mean? Because some people were afraid, some people were quiet, some people were loud and angry. And I remember the one lady who was very put out that she was being inconvenienced because she had to go pick up her kids from school or something. And it's like, I wasn't mad at her. I was more like, wow, it must be nice to be able to worry about these things and not worry about your life or death situation that you're finding yourself in. I'm sure there's a part of that there, but
she was going through the treatment.
But she was there for treatment, and so it's like I got the sense for like who was there for the first day, because they were like scared little puppies, and who was sort of a veteran, just kind of checking in, checking out, reading a magazine, that kind of stuff. And it's like you never get comfortable with it, and you never get okay with it, but you sort of get familiar with it.
Yeah. And then once you're sort of rounding that corner, like, 'cause I've always wondered sort of when do you start sleeping well at night with this kind of thing?
You mean like emotionally or like actually physically getting sleep?
Emotionally.
Geez, I have luckily, I like to say my wife had it worse than me this whole time because I'm being radiated and I'm on chemo, so I'm kind of out of it. Like I'm fuzzy, you know what I mean? My memories from that time, I still remember things, but they're not quite as sharp as maybe the rest of my life. Whereas poor Christy, she's going through all this clear-headed. She's watching her husband deteriorate in front of her with a clear mind.
Yeah.
With her having a clear mind and clear memories, and that's devastating. That's hard. And at least I had the benefit of being radiated, of being sort of out of it, being fuzzy, being foggy.
In a weird way, sedated.
Yeah,
through it all.
Exactly. So I was, maybe it was helpful. In fact, I know it was helpful that I was sort of not quite all there. But in terms of physically being able to sleep through the night, it's funny because when I'm in the worst of it, when I'm in the wheelchair and I'm physically doing my worst, I'm sleeping 18 hours a day. I'm really wiped out. My energy is sapped.
This sounds really dark, but I got to tell you, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
Maybe I should
there's
radiation.
There's something, listen.
I could get a tumor. Can I touch you and get a tumor by touching you?
That's pretty much how it works.
All right, good.
It's not all bad, Paul. It's not all bad. There are some silver linings.
I actually talk about this in fact. I say, lately I've been getting shooting pains above my right eye. And I actually say, I hope it's like a mini stroke.
Yeah.
So 2 days, 2 weeks, I can lie down.
Just chill out.
Just chill out, and then I
no
come
one expects
right
anything
back.
From me.
Right. And apparently, I strike a chord with people because there's a lot of people in the audience that go, I feel the same way. If I could just... Well, it's interesting. I never thought about it that way because my sister went through it, and my wife went through breast cancer, but pre-stage was not... as advanced as a lot of people.
How's she doing?
She's fine. It's been, 8 years now.
Good.
So, yeah. But I do remember her just being wiped out.
Yeah.
And,
it takes a lot on you.
And I don't think we had the scare, obviously, that you had. But, it would make sense that
please don't try
she's
comparing
going
your journey to mine.
What's that? Yeah,
please
exactly. I know, just a little I have a little lump.
I call it's a little lump.
A little pussy cancer. That's what it is.
But pussy cancer is a thing.
Exactly.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, that's a real thing. And how was the writing writing the book? Was that, which again is Shrinkage, Manhood, Marriage, and the Tumor That Tried to Kill Me? Was it painful to sort of bring it all back up again?
Some of it was. Some of it was cathartic.
As I ask you this right now, make it
painful. Could you describe the painful feeling as you went through?
Could you draw it out?
As you relived all of those.
Do you have any photos that
awful memories? Some of it was. Some of it was painful. Some of it was emotional. Much of it was emotional. Some of it was cathartic. I was happy to put a lot of it in. Not in perspective, but compartmentalize it. You know what I mean? Put it in
Explain that in what sense?
These free-flowing memories that I'd had from my recovery, my treatment, my recovery, the depths of my sickness, these memories that I had oh man, remember when I was so sick I blanked or whatever, when I couldn't do this for myself, or when it took me literally 35 minutes to take, 4 pills because I was trying to do it with my left hand and I couldn't physically take pills up to my mouth. And that's not an exaggeration. That actually happened. And it was nice to be able to put it in the context of a narrative and a story that ends well, as opposed to just having these memories, these notions of oh yeah, I remember when it was like that, remember when it was like that. And the most rewarding thing, aside from, all the, the bonus checks and the bestseller lists and all the stuff that's come my way. None of that's come my way. Aside from the most rewarding thing, honestly.
He drove up in a Ferrari the shape of a tumor.
I really did.
That's the big fuck you to the
Well,
tumor.
Luckily, my tumor was the shape of a Ferrari, so it worked out perfectly.
Red and
very sleek, very aerodynamic.
Right. Better that than a Fiat. Those are always breaking down.
The most rewarding thing, I get emails and tweets. I got a tweet yesterday. I get them every day from people who say, your book really helped me understand what my mom went through, or what my dad is going through, or my brother, or my friend, or whatever. And being able, I did not realize this, Paul. I swear to God, when I was writing the book, that it was going to be helpful to people. That it was going to be people could not just learn from it, just get some perspective and understand what people.
Why did you write it?
I wrote it because I got a nice advance. I wrote it because...
That's the best answer I've ever heard.
Because I got an editor who came up to me and said, would you write a book?
Did they hear about you talking about it on the podcast?
No, the book agent, my book agent was, do you remember Teresa Strasser, our old co-host? Her book agent reached out to me and said, hey man, I'm a fan of the show. I think you have a great story. I think we can sell it. Would you write a proposal? I wrote a proposal and I got a nice offer for an advance, and so I was contractually obligated to write a book. Like I said, writing comes easy to me, so it wasn't difficult, and so I just pounded it out. And the nice thing was that it's been helpful to people. The people tell me all the time how helpful it was, and it's a great ancillary benefit of having written a book is that people respond to it in a positive way.
How do you keep your writing fix going, to go back to what we were talking about in terms of what you do now? Because obviously you're a broadcaster.
Right.
And I know, you've got your podcast where you do film review, but sort of how do you keep your writing? And did this tumor and the treatment affect your writing at all, or your ability to write? Or
well, physically it affected my ability to type. I mean, my left hand was immobile,
right.
So I was doing all my typing with my right hand. Let's put it this way. If you got a long email from me between 2009 and 2010, you were very important to me because I was not typing
that
very
took 3
much.
weeks.
Yeah, that took. I was doing. It was all right hand.
Did you have a nice Christmas and it's April, right?
If you got an email from me in the summer of 2009 that included capital letters, you were very important.
Wow.
Because hitting the shift key and then capitalizing was very difficult. I don't know. How do I keep my? I mean, I work on a lot of, as you know. Working in this business, working in this industry involves a lot more than what people see and what people can actually consume. So I do a lot of stuff that affords me sort of a creative outlet, developing ideas or pitches or shows or whatever that allow me to sort of write. But also the other side of that is, you've written scripts. What's the longest thing you've ever written? Most involved thing you've ever read?
Scripted half hour, okay. 50, 60 pages.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but the process of writing a book that comes out and the process of getting a book onto a shelf, writing it is the proverbial tip of the iceberg. Underneath the water is editing and proofreading and photo shoots and the cover and blurbs and publicity and podcasts and traveling and signings and audiobooks. And it is a Sisyphean effort of pushing a boulder up a hill forever. When the book comes out, you're not done. I'll never be done. Right. There's nothing just done about Shrinkage. You know what I mean? The paperback's coming out, and I'm happy to promote it because I believe in it. But it's a Sisyphean effort where you're never done pushing that boulder up that hill. And people ask me, they're like, "Oh, your book made the bestseller list. Are you going to write another book? Are you going to do a follow-up?" And my answer is, fuck no. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I will at some point because I love writing, and I'm sure I will. But the notion of doing this again and do it, I'm sure I could do it half-assed, but the notion of doing it again as though it were my first book and as though I want to put as much effort into it, as much of my heart into it, I need a little break. I need a little break before I think about writing something like that again.
There's a philosopher, Neville, that I follow, and he believes in manifestation and is a big proponent of basically living it.
Is he alive? Is this a current guy, or is he an old?
No, he's dead. He's a French philosopher.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, and had a tumor just like you now.
Jesus. Handsome bastard.
Yeah, exactly. And is a big believer in this idea, sort of, if you are living it, it becomes true, right? Okay. And so it sounds a little bit like when you got your prognosis, you just wouldn't let yourself believe that it was 6 months, right? Sure. So one could argue perhaps it became true. This is going to sound crazy, but maybe if there's a God or whatever it is, you got a tumor because you needed something to write about.
That is
because you weren't writing, and I don't know if that's dime store psychology.
No. I touched on that, not that, but I touched on that notion in the book, which was I was listening. So, speaking of philosophy or those types of things, I was introduced to guided meditation because I'm a kind of guy who's open-minded. I'll try anything.
I'm thinking of trying meditation. Do you do it?
I did it when I was going through the treatment.
Did it help?
It helped tremendously. Because it's just even if you don't have this great epiphany, it's great to just quiet your mind and to take time to just reflect and put the day's events in order and in some semblance of meaning. And guided meditation is sort of like beginners because someone is literally telling you, okay, now breathe in, or whatever. Now think about this.
Are you using a tape or something?
Yeah, I think my buddy gave me a bunch of CDs, and I digitized them and it's on my iPod or whatever. And I had my mind blown one day because I'm doing my guided meditation, and this is one that's specifically for cancer. And the woman says, "Now I want you to thank your tumor." And I thought to myself, that's weird. Like, well, did I hear that right? And she said, "Thank your tumor for showing you what's important in life, and for giving you purpose, and for making you look at the world in a new way, and for those types of things," and say, "Okay, thank you. You've done what you've come here to do, and now you can go. I'm done with you now." And I thought about that and blew my mind. And I was like, in a weird way, I am thankful for this tumor, because I am looking at life a little differently. And to extend to what you were saying, I probably never would have written a best-selling book had I not had a brain tumor. So thank God I did, and thank God I was able to turn it into something.
And where did you buy the tumor? Because you had to put in so you could write the book.
Yeah, right. I clicked through the Amazon banner on AdamCarolla.com. So we got a little kickback.
We got a kickback.
Yeah.
Well, do you permanently look at life differently now after this experience than you did before? I know I take a lot of things for granted, and I bitch and complain.
Right.
And I would imagine that if I went through this, hopefully I'd be bitching and complaining less.
You would be. No, you wouldn't be. You would be complaining the same. The reason I say
know
that,
me too
I know you, and I know human nature. The reason I say that is people ask me that a lot, and my answer is no. I don't look at life all that differently, to be honest with you. I look at life the same way I did beforehand. I mean, I have a greater appreciation for things, and what I have greater appreciation for is I really appreciate the little things in life. I remember the first time after my treatment when I got frustrated that the mailman didn't take a letter I had left out for him, and I was pissed, and I stopped and I thought, how nice is it to not be worried about life and death, and to like be pissed that the mailman didn't take my letter. It's so nice to be pissed about the little things. And people, there's books written, don't sweat the small stuff. Fuck that. Sweat the small stuff, because it's great to have the biggest problem of the day be, my gas is lower than a quarter tank. I need to find a gas station. If that's the biggest problem of the day, or I didn't make that red light, or if that's it, you're living, man. You're doing it. So there's some solace to be taken in the small stuff.
All right. Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're well. You're not going anywhere, and I guess the tumor's not going anywhere either. It's hanging out, but it's small.
I like I say, if I can live like this with a tumor at bay for the next 30 years, I'll be a happy man. So,
absolutely. And you have to write a follow-up,
my next 30 years with the tumor.
My next 30. No, it should be
the long-anticipated follow-up.
Fuck the tumor. I'm going to my left.
I'm going to the left.
I just want 1% of the royalties. I'm driving left. The book is Shrinkage, Manhood, Marriage, and the Tumor That Tried to Kill Me. The podcast is the Adam Carolla podcast, which is hugely successful, and your podcast, The Vault.
Film Vault,
where you do film reviews, movie talk. Yeah. It's really interesting. I listened to a couple of people. Should check that out. iTunes, right? They can hear that on iTunes. Of course. And thank you for doing this. You're the best.
Dude, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad we were finally able to do it. And, man, it was fun.
Yeah, we got to get a beer now.
For sure.
All right, brother.
See you, pal.
Thank you. All right, that was Bald Bryan Bishop from the Adam Carolla podcast, and best-selling, New York Times best-selling author, Shrinkage, Manhood, Marriage, and the Tumor That Tried to Kill Me. Get the book, a great read, a great guy. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm in LA for the next few weeks working on a pilot, so you can see me in the LA area. Look me up. I'm at the Improv. I'm at the Laugh Factory and the Pasadena Ice House, among other places. So just go online to see where I am, paulmecurio.com, and you can pick up my CD. It's Not Me, It's the World. New CD out. It's the most brilliant CD ever, according to my mother. All right, thanks for checking out the podcast, people.